right, good morning. So, we are going to start today with chapter 28, The Madness of Mr. Crouch. Alright, so hopefully you've already read or watched the two other videos, and this will be video 3. I hope I'm doing this right. Alright. Here we go. Harry, Ron, and Hermione went up to the Owlery after breakfast on Sunday to send a letter to Percy asking, as Sirius had suggested, whether he had seen Mr. Crouch lately. They used Hedwig because it had been so long since she had a job. When they had watched her fly out of sight through the Owlery window, they proceeded down to the kitchen to give Dobby his new socks. The house elf gave them a very cheery welcome, bowing and curtsying and bustling around making tea again. Dobby was ecstatic about his present. "Harry Potter is too good to Dobby," he squeaked, wiping large tears out of his enormous eyes. "You saved my life with that gillyweed, Dobby. You really did," said Harry. "No chance of more of those eclairs, is there?" said Ron, who was looking around at the beaming and bowing house elves. "You've just had breakfast," said Hermione irritably, but a great silver platter of eclairs was already zooming towards them, supported by 4 elves. "We should get some stuff to send up to Snuffles," Harry muttered. "Good idea," said Ron. "Give Pig something to do." "You couldn't give us a bit of extra food, could you?" he said to the surrounding elves, and they bowed delightedly and hurried off to get more food. "Dobby, where's Winky?" said Hermione, who was looking around. "Winky is over there by the fire, miss," said Dobby quietly, his ears drooping slightly. "Oh, dear," said Hermione as she spotted Winky. Harry looked over at the fireplace too. Winky was sitting on the same stool as last time, but she had allowed herself to become so filthy that she was not immediately distinguishable from the smoke-blackened brick behind her. Her clothes were ragged and unwashed. She was clutching a bottle of butterbeer and swaying slightly on her stool, staring into the fire. As they watched her, she gave an enormous hiccup. "Winky is getting through 6 bottles a day," Dobby whispered to Harry. "Well, it's not strong, that stuff," Harry said. But Dobby shook his head. "'Tis strong for a house elf, sir," he said. Winky hiccuped again. The elves who had brought the eclairs gave her disapproving looks, and they returned to work. "Winky is pinning Harry Potter," Dobby whispered sadly. "Winky wants to go home. Winky still thinks Mr. Crouch is her master, sir, and nothing Dobby says will persuade her that Professor Dumbledore is her master now." "Hey, Winky," said Harry, struck by a sudden inspiration, walking over to her and bending down. "You don't know what Mr. Crouch might be up to, do you?" Because he stopped turning up to judge the Triwizard Tournament. And so I'm reckoning that was our Winky right there. She's in bad shape. All right, let's see what she says. Winky's eyes flickered. Her enormous pupils focused on Harry. She swayed slightly again and then said, "Master has stopped coming." "Yeah," said Harry. "We haven't seen him since the first task. The Daily Prophet is saying he's ill." Winky swayed some more, staring blurrily at Harry. "Master ill?" Her bottom lip began to tremble. "But we're not sure if that's true," said Hermione quickly. "Master is needing his Winky," whimpered the elf. "Master cannot manage people manage to do their housework, you know, Winky, said Hermione severely. Winky is not only doing housework for Mr. Crouch, Winky squeaked indignantly, swaying worse than ever and slopping butterbeer down her already heavily stained blouse. Master is trusting Winky with the most important, the most secret. What? Said Harry. But Winky shook her head very hard, spilling more butterbeer down herself. Winky keeps her master's secrets, she said, mutinously, swaying very heavily now, frowning up at Harry with her eyes crossed. You is nosing, you is. Winky must not talk to my... I'm sorry. Winky must not talk like that to Harry Potter, said Dobby angrily. Harry Potter is brave and noble, and Harry Potter is not nosy. He is nosing into my master's private and secret. Winky is a good house elf. Winky keeps her silence. People trying to pry and poke. Winky's eyelids drooped, and suddenly, without warning, she slid off her stool into the hearth, snoring loudly. The empty bottle of butterbeer rolled away across the stone-flagged floor. Half a dozen house elves came hurrying forward, looking disgusted. One of them picked up the bottle. The others covered Winky with a large checked tablecloth and tucked the ends in neatly, hiding her from view. We is sorry you had to see that, sirs and miss, squeaked a nearby elf, shaking his head and looking very ashamed. We is hoping you will not judge us all by Winky, sirs and miss. She's unhappy, said Hermione, exasperated. Why don't you try and cheer her up instead of covering her up? Begging your pardon, miss, said the house elf, bowing deeply again, but house elves has no right to be unhappy when there is work to be done and masters to be served. Oh, for heaven's sake, Hermione cried, listen to me, all of you. You've got as much right as wizards to be unhappy. Why do they want to be unhappy? All right, let me try that again. You've got just as much right as wizards to be unhappy. You've got the right to wages and holidays and proper clothes. You don't have to do everything you're told. Look at Dobby. Miss, well, please keep Dobby out of this, Dobby mumbled, looking scared. The cheery smiles had vanished from the faces of the house elves around the kitchen. They were suddenly looking at Hermione as though she were mad and dangerous. We has your extra food, squeaked an elf at Harry's elbow, and he shoved a large ham, a dozen cakes, and some fruit into Harry's arms. Goodbye! The house elves crowded around Harry, Ron, and Hermione and began shunting them out of the kitchen, many little hands pushing in the smalls of their backs. Thank you for the socks, Harry Potter, Dobby called miserably from the hearth where he was standing next to the lumpy tablecloth that was Winky. You couldn't keep your mouth shut, could you, Hermione? Said Ron angrily as the kitchen door slammed shut behind them. They won't want us visiting them now. We could have tried to get more stuff out of Winky about Crouch. Oh, as if you care about that, scoffed Hermione. You only like coming down here for the food. It was an irritable sort of day after that. Harry got so tired of Ron and Hermione snipping at each other over their homework in the common room that he took Sirius's food up to the owlery that evening on his own. Pigwidgeon was much too small to carry an entire ham up to the mountain by herself, so Harry enlisted the help of 2 school screech owls as well. When they had set off into the dusk, looking extremely odd carrying the large package between them, Harry leaned on the window sill, looking out at the grounds, at the dark rustling tree tops of the forbidden forest and the rippling sails of the Durmstrang ship. An eagle flew through the coil of smoke rising from Hagrid's chimney. It soared toward the castle around the owlery and out of sight. Looking down, Harry wondered what he was doing. Oh, hey, Minnie, come here. You want to say hi? Come here. Minnie. Come here, Minnie. Oh, here she is. She hit her head. Oh, there's Minnie. She loves reading Harry Potter. Oh, yes. Tell him you've been pretty good today. Tell him you went and got in Granny's bed and said you wanted to do some heavy sleeping. All right, let me get back to it. All right. Looking down, Harry saw Hagrid digging energetically in front of his cabin. Harry wondered what he was doing. It looked as though he were making a new vegetable patch. As he watched, Madame Maxime emerged from the Beauxbatons' carriage and walked over to Hagrid. She appeared to be trying to engage him in conversation. Hagrid leaned upon his spade, but did not seem keen to prolong their talk because Madame Maxime returned to the carriage shortly afterwards. Unwilling to go back to Gryffindor Tower and listen to Ron and Hermione snarling at each other, Harry watched Hagrid digging until the darkness swallowed him and the owls around Harry began to awake, swooshing past him into the night. By breakfast the next day, Ron's and Hermione's bad moods had burnt out, and to Harry's relief, Ron's dark predictions that the house elves would send substandard food up to the Gryffindor table because Hermione had insulted them proved false. The bacon, eggs, and kippers were quite as good as usual. When the post owls arrived, Hermione looked up eagerly. She seemed to be expecting something. "Percy won't have had time to answer yet," said Ron. "We only sent Hedwig yesterday." "No, it's not that," said Hermione. "I've taken a subscription to the Daily Prophet. I'm getting sick of finding everything out from the Slytherins." "Good thinking," said Harry, also looking up at the owls. "Hey, Hermione, I think you're in luck." A gray owl was soaring down towards Hermione. "It hasn't got a newspaper, though," she said, looking disappointed. But to her bewilderment, the gray owl landed in front of her plate, closely followed by 4 barn owls, a brown owl, and a tawny. "How many subscriptions did you take out?" said Harry, seizing Hermione's goblet before it was knocked over by the cluster of owls, all of whom were jostling close to her, trying to deliver their own letter first. "What on earth?" Hermione said, taking the letter from the gray owl, opening it, and starting to read. "Oh, really?" she sputtered, going rather red. "What's up?" said Ron. Oh, how ridiculous." She thrust the letter at Harry, who saw that it was not handwriting, but composed from pasted letters that seemed to be cut out of the Daily Prophet. "You are a wicked girl. Harry Potter deserves better. Go back where you came from, Muggle." "They're all like it," said Hermione desperately, opening one letter after another. "Harry Potter can do much better than the likes of you. You deserve to be boiled in frog spawn. Ouch!" She had opened the last envelope, and yellowish green liquid smelling strongly of petrol, that's like, I guess, gas, gushed over her hands, which began to erupt in large yellow boils. Diluted Bulbertuber-Puss, said Ron, picking up the envelope, sniffing it gingerly. Ow! Said Hermione, tears starting in her eyes as she tried to rub the pus off her hands with a napkin. But her fingers were now so thickly covered in painful sores that it looked as though she were wearing a pair of thick, knobbly gloves. You'd better get up to the hospital wing, said Harry, as the owls around Hermione took flight. We'll tell Professor Sprout where you've gone. I warned her, said Ron, as Hermione hurried out of the great hall, cradling her hands. I warned her not to annoy Rita Skeeter. Look at this one. He read out one of the letters Hermione had left behind. I read in Witch Weekly about how you were playing Harry Potter false and that boy's had enough hardship, and I will be sending you a curse by person as soon as I can find a big enough envelope. Blimey, she'd better watch out for herself. Hermione didn't turn up for herbology. As Harry and Ron left the greenhouse for their Care of Magical Creatures class, they saw Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle descending the stone steps of the castle. Pansy Parkinson was whispering and giggling behind them with her gang of Slytherin girls. Catching sight of Harry Potter, Pansy called, Potter, have you split up with your girlfriend? Why was she so upset at breakfast? Harry ignored her. He didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much trouble the Witch Weekly article had caused. Hagrid, who had told them last lesson that they had finished with unicorns, was waiting for them outside his cabin with a fresh supply of open crates at his feet. Harry's heart sank at the sight of the crates. Surely not another Scroot hatching, but when he got near enough to see inside, he found himself looking at a number of fluffy black creatures with long snouts. Their front paws were curiously flat like spades, and they were blinking up at the class, looking politely puzzled at all the attention. These are Nifflers, said Hagrid when the class had gathered around. You'll find 'em down mines mostly. They like sparkly stuff. There, look, go ahead. One of the Nifflers had suddenly leapt up and attempted to bite Pansy Parkinson's watch off her wrist. She shrieked and jumped backward. Useful little treasure detectors, said Hagrid happily. Thought we'd have some fun with 'em today. See over there? He pointed at the large patch of freshly turned earth Harry had watched him digging up from the owlery window. I've buried some gold coins. I've got a prize for whoever picks the Niffler that digs up the most. Just take off all your valuables and choose a Niffler, and get ready to set 'em loose. Harry took off his watch, which he was only wearing out of habit, as it didn't work any more, and stuffed it into his pocket. Then he picked up a Niffler. It put its long snout in Harry's ear and sniffed enthusiastically. It was really quite cuddly. Hang on, said Hagrid, looking down into the crate. There's a spare Niffler here. Who's missing? Where's Hermione? She had to go to the hospital wing, said Ron. We'll explain later, Harry muttered. Pansy Parkinson was listening. It was easily the most fun they had ever had in a Care of Magical Creatures class. The Nifflers dived in and out of the patch of earth as though it were water, each scurrying back to the student who had released it and spitting gold into their hands. Ron's was particularly efficient. It had soon filled his lap with coins. Can you buy these as pets, Hagrid? He asked excitedly as his Niffler dived back into the soil, splattering his robes. Your mom wouldn't be happy, Ron, said Hagrid, grinning. They wreck houses, Nifflers. I reckon they nearly got the lot now," he added, pacing around the patch of earth while the Nifflers continued to dive. "I only buried 100 coins. Oh, there you are, Hermione." Hermione was walking toward them across the lawn. Her hands were heavily bandaged and she looked miserable. Pansy Parkinson was watching her beadily. "Well, let's check how you've done," said Hagrid. "Count your coins, and there's no point in trying to steal any, Goyle," he added, his beetle-black eyes narrowed. "It's leprechaun gold. Vanishes after a few hours." Goyle emptied his pockets, looking extremely sulky. It turned out that Ron's Niffler had been the most successful, so Hagrid gave him an enormous slab of Honeyduke's chocolate for a prize. The bell rang across the grounds for lunch. The rest of the class set off back to the castle, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione stayed behind to help Hagrid put the Nifflers back in their boxes. Harry noticed Madame Maxime watching them out of her carriage window. What you done to your hands, Hermione?" said Hagrid, looking concerned. Hermione told him all about the hate mail she had received that morning and the envelope full of bubo-tuber pus. "Ah, don't worry," said Hagrid gently, looking down at her. "I got some of those letters and all, after Rita Skeeter wrote about my mom. You're a monster and you should be put down. Your mother killed innocent people, and if you had any decency, you'd jump in a lake." "No," said Hermione, looking shocked. "Yeah," said Hagrid, leaving the Niffler crates over by his cabin wall. "They're just nutters, Hermione. Don't open 'em if you get any more. Chuck 'em straight into the fire." "You really missed a good lesson," Harry told Hermione as they headed back to the castle. "They're good Nifflers, aren't they, Ron?" Ron, however, was frowning at the chocolate Hagrid had given him. He looked thoroughly put out about something. "What's the matter?" said Harry. "Wrong flavor?" "No," said Ron shortly. "Why didn't you tell me about the gold?" "What gold?" said Harry. "The gold I gave you at the Quidditch World Cup," said Ron. The leprechaun gold I gave you for my omnoculars. In the top box. Why didn't you tell me it disappeared?" Harry had to think a moment before he realized what Ron was talking about. "Oh," he said, the memory coming back to him at last. "I don't know. I never noticed it had gone. I was more worried about my wand, wasn't I?" They climbed the steps into the entrance hall and went into the great hall for lunch. "Must be nice," Ron said abruptly when they had sat down and started serving themselves roast beef and Yorkshire puddings, "to have so much money you don't notice if a pocketful of galleons goes missing." "Listen, I had other stuff on my mind that night, okay?" said Harry impatiently. "We all did, remember?" "I didn't know leprechaun gold vanishes," Ron muttered. "I thought I was paying you back. You shouldn't have given me that Chudley cannon hat for Christmas." "Forget it, all right?" said Harry. Ron speared a roast potato on the end of his fork, glaring at it. Then he said, "I hate being poor." Harry and Hermione looked at each other. Neither of them really knew what to say. "It's rubbish," said Ron, still glaring down at his potato. "I don't blame Fred and George for trying to make extra money. Wish I could. Wish I had a Niffler." "Well, we know what to get you next Christmas," said Hermione brightly. Then Ron continued to look gloomy. She said, "Come on, Ron. It could be worse. At least your fingers aren't full of pus." Hermione was having a lot of difficulty managing her knife and fork. Her fingers were so stiff and swollen. "I hate that Skeeter woman," she burst out savagely. "I'll get her back for this if it's the last thing I do." Hate mail continued to arrive for Hermione over the following week, and although she followed Hagrid's advice and stopped opening it, several of her ill-wishers had sent howlers which exploded at the Gryffindor table. They exploded at the table and shrieked insults at her for the whole hall to hear. Even those people who hadn't read Witch Weekly knew all about the supposed Harry, Crumb, Hermione triangle now. Harry was getting sick of telling people that Hermione wasn't his girlfriend. "It'll die down, though," he told Hermione, "if we just ignore it. People got bored with that stuff she wrote about me last time. I want to know how she's listening into private conversations when she's supposed to be banned from the grounds," said Hermione angrily. Hermione hung back in their next defense against the dark arts lesson to ask Professor Moody something. The rest of the class was eager to leave. Moody had given them such a rigorous test of hex deflection that many of them were nursing small injuries. Harry had such a bad case of twitchy ears. He had to hold his hands clamped over them as he walked away from the class. "Well, Rita's definitely not got an invisibility cloak," Hermione panted 5 minutes later, catching up with Harry and Ron in the entrance hall and pulling Harry's hand away from one of his wiggling ears so he could hear her. "Moody says he didn't see her anywhere near the judge's table at the second task or anywhere near the lake." "Hermione, is there any point in telling you to drop this?" said Ron. "No," said Hermione stubbornly. "I want to know how she's heard me talking to Victor and how she found out about Hagrid's mom." "Maybe she has you bugged," said Harry. "Bugged?" said Ron blankly. "What? Put fleas on her or something?" Harry started explaining about hidden microphones and recording equipment. Ron was fascinated, but Hermione interrupted them. "Aren't you two ever going to read Hogwarts a history?" "What's the point?" said Ron. "You know it by heart. We can just ask you." "All those substitutes for magic Muggles use, electricity, computers, and radar and all those things, they all go haywire around Hogwarts. There's too much magic in the air." "No, Rita's using magic to eavesdrop. She must be. If I could just find out what it is. Ooh, it has to be illegal. I'll have her." "Haven't we got enough to worry about?" Ron asked her. "Do we have to start a vendetta against Rita Skeeter as well?" "I'm not asking you to help," Hermione snapped. "I'll do it on my own." She marched back up the marble staircase without a backward glance. Harry was quite sure she was going to the library. "What's the betting she comes back with a box of I Hate Rita Skeeter badges?" said Ron. Hermione, however, did not ask Harry and Ron to help her pursue vengeance against Rita Skeeter, for which they were both grateful because their workload was mounting ever higher in the days before the Easter holidays. Harry frankly marveled at the fact that Hermione could even research magical methods of eavesdropping as well as everything else they had to do. He was working flat out just to get through all their homework, though he made a point of sending regular food packages up to the cave in the mountain for Sirius. After last summer, Harry had not forgotten what it felt like to be continually hungry. He enclosed notes to Sirius telling him that nothing out of the ordinary had happened and that they were still waiting to hear an answer from Percy. Hedwig didn't return until the end of the Easter holidays. Percy's letter was enclosed in a package of Easter eggs that Mrs. Weasley had sent. Both Harry's and Ron's were the size of dragon eggs and full of homemade toffee. Hermione's, however, was smaller than a chicken egg. Her face fell when she saw it. "Your mom doesn't read Witch Weekly by any chance, does she, Ron?" she asked quietly. Yeah, said Ron, whose mouth was full of toffee. Gets it for the recipes. Hermione looked sadly at her tiny egg. Don't you want to see what Percy's written? Harry asked her hastily. Percy's letter was short and irritated. As I am constantly telling the Daily Prophet, Mr. Crouch is taking a well-deserved break. He is sending in regular owls with instructions. No, I haven't actually seen him, but I can be trusted to know my own superior's handwriting. I have quite enough to do at the moment without trying to quash these ridiculous rumors. Please don't bother me again unless it's something important. Happy Easter! The start of the summer term would normally have meant that Harry was training hard for the last Quidditch match of the season. This year, however, it was the third and final task in the Triwizard Tournament for which he needed to prepare, but he still didn't know what he would have to do. Finally, in the last week of May, Professor McGonagall held him back in Transfiguration. You are to go down to the Quidditch field tonight at 9 o'clock, Potter, she told him. Mr. Bagman will be there to tell the champions about the third task. So, at 8:30 that night, Harry left Ron and Hermione in Gryffindor Tower and went downstairs. As he crossed the entrance hall, Cedric came up from the Hufflepuff common room. What do you reckon it's going to be? He asked Harry as they went down together out into the cloudy night. Fleur keeps going on about underground tunnels. She reckons we've got to find treasure. That wouldn't be too bad, said Harry, thinking that he would simply ask Hagrid for a Niffler to do the job for him. They walked down the dark lawn to the Quidditch stadium, turned through a gap in the stands, and walked out onto the field. What have they done to it? Cedric said indignantly, stopping dead. The Quidditch field was no longer smooth and flat. It looked as though somebody had been building long, low walls all over it that twisted and crisscrossed in every direction. They're hedges, said Harry, bending to examine the nearest one. Hello there, called a cheery voice. Ludo Bagman was standing in the middle of the field with Crumb and Fleur. Harry and Cedric made their way toward them, climbing over the hedges. Fleur beamed at Harry as he came nearer. Her attitude toward him had changed completely since he had saved her sister from the lake. Well, what do you think? Said Bagman happily as Harry and Cedric climbed over the last hedge. Growing nicely, aren't they? Give them a month and Hagrid'll have them 20 feet high. Don't worry, he added, grinning, spotting the less than happy expressions on Harry and Cedric's faces. You'll have your Quidditch field back to normal once the task is over. Now, I imagine you can guess what's going on here. No one spoke for a moment. Then, maze, grunted Crumb. That's right, said Bagman, a maze. The third task's really very straightforward. The Triwizard Cup will be placed in the center of the maze. The first champion to reach it will receive full marks. We simply have to get through the maze, said Fleur. There will be obstacles, said Bagman happily, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Hagrid is providing a number of creatures. Then there will be spells that must be broken, all that sort of thing, you know. Now, the champions who are leading on points will get a head start in the maze. Bagman grinned at Harry and Cedric. Then Mr. Crumb will enter, then Mrs. Delacour. But you'll all be in with a fighting chance, depending on how well you get past the obstacles. Should be fun, eh? Harry, who knew only too well that the kind of creatures that Hagrid was likely to provide for an event like this, thought it was unlikely to be fun at all. However, he nodded politely like the other champions. Very well. If you hadn't got any questions, We'll go back up to the castle, shall we? It's a bit chilly. Bagman hurried alongside Harry as they began to wend their way out of the maze. Harry had the feeling that Bagman was going to start offering help to him again, but just then Crumb tapped Harry on the shoulder. "Could I have a word?" "Yeah, all right," said Harry, slightly surprised. "Will you walk with me?" "Okay," said Harry curiously. Bagman looked slightly perturbed. "I'll wait for you, Harry, shall I?" "No, it's okay, Mr. Bagman," said Harry, suppressing a smile. "I think I can find the castle on my own, thanks." Harry and Crumb left the stadium together, but Crumb did not set a course for the Durmstrang ship. Instead, he walked toward the forest. Okay, I'm going to stop there and I'll do a part 2 on this one, so I'll see you in a minute. Goodbye.